Hello, everyone. This is Silk. We are doing a strategic recap for From Russia with Love, Turn 10. And as kind of promised, things definitely heated up pretty much across the whole world, really. This is certainly the thick of it, kind of is where we're at here. And we're going to kind of highlight some of that and discuss it a little bit. And then, kind of the second half, I'm going to do a little discussion on diplomacy a little bit. Somebody had thrown a question to me on the last video I had posted asking about the sort of odd diplomacy going on with the Soviet Union. So I'm going to try to explain that for a little bit for everybody. So overlooking the first things first, kind of the income. Things are pretty close to what I would consider to be sort of standard normal. Given that Germany and the Soviet Union are not at war, they'll often be kind of neck and neck with each other at this stage in the game. Japan is right about where kind of they belong, given that they're not having seized the Dutch islands. If they had the Dutch islands, they'd have a bit more than this, but they haven't, and I'm not sure they're in position that they're going to, but maybe they will. We'll see. You might see the Dutch islands fall this turn again. A lot of that's going to come down to what they decide are their priorities and all of that. Um, but overall, this is pretty normal. Italy has kind of spiked up with their entry into the war. We'll see if they can use that income enough to keep themselves alive when the Allies come fighting for them. Looking at the Czech chart, I think the most interesting thing was this here. The U.S. has both strategic bombers and heavy bombers and strategic rockets done, and only need these two here for tech supremacy, and they will A, get a point, and B, get both a rocket and a heavy bomber out of it. So you could very easily see a U.S. bombing campaign if they see the value for it. At the same time, however, the naval's just a disaster. Japan has heavy ships completed. The U.S. still, the dice have just denied it to them. So the U.S. is going to fight at a definite negative in the Pacific there. Everything else is coming along decently for them. They would certainly rather have this higher, given the chance. They would probably trade this for either of these pretty happily, just from a real politic kind of standpoint. Um, but you got two techs done, so you'll see the U.S. Uh, start a new one, kind of exploring there. Soviets, meanwhile, are having a terrible time with their tech supremacy, whereas the U.S. is rolling right along. Soviets are struggling mightily with rockets all the way back here, still at stage one. Real problem with that. Soviets did reach out and start a new tech with long-range aircraft next turn, or last turn, I should say, but they failed, so no real new developments there. And the German tech program is just rolling right along. Got their core bits. Anticipate they'll go for factories, jets, and submarines, and I guess something else, right? Oh no, artillery. So he'll do artillery. He'll do artillery, factories, jets, subs is his text for next turn. And England finished this. I must not have updated that correctly because England finished anti-sub warfare. They scored that. So that's an update on my part. I must have not marked that up on their turn. As for what's going on, certainly this is going to be your main focus of the board here. England or Germany is going pretty hard at England, trying to kind of threaten the homeland, so to speak. Global War enthusiasts kind of adopted a pretty interesting approach here, trying to use map fighters in the fleet in port to try to kind of control and dictate where the Germans can go, and then he's using a sort of a main core army here in the Midlands to hold it off. And we'll see how that works. There was a bit of a misplay on his part. He brought a fighter out, additional one basically on map over here in A21, kind of with the intention of expanding the line. And his plan was to bring 3 additional fighters. He had them to spare with that fighter to kind of deal with any scramble that the Germans did, which the Germans did scramble. I think they probably would have scrambled either way, but hard to ever know what Hambone necessarily would have or wouldn't have done. But just in the all of the turn, GWE didn't bring the 3 fighters, so that left a lone fighter by itself on map. Hambone scrambled it, and one fighter versus three is just no contest. Um, and the fighter went down. And the downside of that is at that point there's not a fighter sitting here on map. So Hambone's going to have a lot of options for what he can do here. I'm not even probably going to get into them all because there's just too many, and I am an active player in this game, so don't want to too much modify what people are doing. But he's got a lot of different things that he can do, given the way his forces are arrayed right here. So we're gonna be looking forward to seeing what he does with that. Meanwhile, America's in the war, and their infantry battalions are all set, ready to rock and roll. We'll see where they end up putting those. They've got the 3 transports. Um, Fleet's gone though. He basically, this fleet here ran across to the Pacific, and then the other fleet came over here. And he's putting pressure into the Med, partially because of what we got right here. The Italians have their entire fleet sitting right off of Egypt, and if the Allies can kill that, that will reduce their pressure level significantly. And they'll kind of be able to turn the tables and start taking things back from Italy. Um, so the Mediterranean fight, you're going to see a whole lot of action here in the next 1, 2, 3 turns. Russians might even get in on it if they can figure out a way to make it work, because it's just all sorts of good fun. As for Africa, this is pretty normal. The Italians, don't have a whole lot to work with because of the way they didn't have a whole lot to work with at the start. So they just kind of he did bring a fighter. I think ABGB is looking to leverage this as some firepower kind of thing. Um, we'll see how the Allies choose to deal with that. Germans are in control of North Africa, which is great for them cash-wise. I'm not sure the attack on the Vichy worked out for the Allies the way they thought it would. It did let them sink a bunch of Vichy boats, but it gave the German 2 boats, and it gave them Syria, which gave them Iraq, and really kind of opened up some opportunities and gave them the ability to actually land real units on all these territories. So it's something that's kind of a interesting tidbit. But the Mediterranean is definitely going to be a major conflict zone. Uh, North Atlantic and London is your major conflict zone there. And then over here in the Middle East, things are going to get interesting. Soviets are definitely going to take out Iran. We'll see what happens with the Germans. They've got a nice little stack of 3 armor here, and enough to cavalry and infantry to kind of make some noise if they decide they want to. A little bit of why we kind of tried to secure Kiev a little bit. If he really wants to try to come in, he can cause me some troubles. Um, that's why at the same time I've got a decent army here to at least kind of be able to do some pushback, and I've got some planes up there and some planes down here, so I can push back if I need to. I think that's why you've got a little bit of a standoff there with the Germans and the Russians both kind of trying to eye the other one as we start moving forward. Meanwhile, Japan did go to war, and oh, poor Sydney. So what happened in Sydney is just dice being dice. Like you just got to deal with it kind of thing. So Panzer J came into right here with 2 transports and these 3 destroyers that are up here, and to drop off here into South Wales, and not really thinking about the fact that the 2 fighters that were entirely contrived to get there just in time to screw with the tactical bombers, because he only has 3 tactical bombers. He doesn't have any fighters. He doesn't have that. The Japanese have no air superiority here. So those 2 fighters were going to really wreak some havoc on the first turn, where those fighter hits automatically kill the tactical bombers, and suddenly taking Sydney would have been really, really hard. So I really liked the way the 2 fighters came down. But what happened was the transports and the destroyers came over, and you had 3 destroyers at that point potentially fighting 2 scrambling fighters, and those fighters get to take hits off of a destroyer that's got a marine on it. It's a $10 swing for every hit, and One hit might have forced a retreat, and two definitely would have forced a retreat, I think, from the Japanese and just really slowed them down, an entire turn. And at that point, the blockade doesn't happen, which lets more Lend-Lease arrive. Like just across the board, would have absolutely understand why the scramble was the play. I think I would have done the same thing. But the dice are dice. The scramble dice were double 12s for the fighters, and the destroyers got two hits, just two, just right off the bat. So in one turn, 9 pips got 2 hits, and 12 pips got 0 hits, and two fighters that were essential to the defense of Sydney just went away with no uh, damage or cost to their side. And boy, does that swing things. This is still a tough fight here in Sydney. Like this fortification is going to matter. The city's not surrounded, so I don't know that Japan's actually going to come in, but it definitely swung uh, the Axis way there in a very very big real way. As for up here, kind of as I noted with the income, Japan hasn't taken the DI yet. Probably because they didn't want to give the money to the Americans, but the Americans are now at war, so giving the DI money away is as big a deal. But I'm not entirely sure, just given the way his fleets are. He doesn't have a whole lot of ships here. Again, he's got a lot down here by Sydney. So you may not see him do that yet. He may wait another turn or two before he does that. And meanwhile, here in Belgium, not Belgium, Burma, uh, the FEC is holding itself pretty well. Calcutta's not particularly vulnerable. Like that's a whole lot of stuff with the AA and the fortification. And this stack here that's sitting in Bengal is what, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 units plus 3 AAA. Like more than enough. That if Japan tries to step into Burma, you may just see these guys step right back and just crush them. So we'll see how Japan tries to play that out. And meanwhile, the KMT is also sitting pretty. They've got 2 strategic bombers, 2 airborne, 6 artillery, like more than enough to kind of move and cause some trouble. And so long as the Allies can keep that Burma Road going, KMT is just going to get bigger. It's going to keep making money. The U.S. is going to keep sending things there. The Commonwealth, when they have the extra cash, they'll send stuff there. This war is by no means over. This KMT is going to be around for a long time and be a real thorn in the side, I think, of Japan to deal with as far as that goes. That's probably about it as far as kind of everything that's happened and core spots to look out. It's going to be definitely all this space up here. You're going to see some fun fights in the Med. You see a little bit more action in the Mideast. You may see some action here on the eastern front with Germans. Soviets don't really have any units in position to mess with them, so it's really just kind of questions whether Germany decides they want to grab some quick cash or not, and then flip things around, create some pressure points. But that's about it. So the next thing I just kind of wanted to touch on a little bit was the diplomacy angle. And somebody kind of asked, what's going on? Why are the Soviets at war with the Italians, but not at war with the Germans? Kind of what's going on here. And part of that is a little bit to understand just kind of the timing and elements of some of the game mechanics. In particular, the Soviets are trying to milk the MR Pact, the Mellantrop, or Melenkov-Ribbentrop Pact, for as much as they can get here as far as their cash and their tech rolls. And the Germans, seemingly so far, are content to use the extra $5 to pad their bottom line. But the Soviets needed to go to war so that they could trigger their big recruitment fire sale and get troops on the board. Because if you don't get your troops on the board, Germany is going to kill you. So you got to get your forces down and in place, hopefully before Germany comes after you. And it lets you create these kinds of circumstances where I already have troops in Kiev. Like this is, yes, it's only 7 units, but it's 7 units that, unless he surrounds the city, are all going to be firing at +1. That's mean to do, and he'd have to spend a bomber to take out this airfield, and then still take eastern Ukraine, push all the way to here, and then still also attack Kiev. Like that's just really hard without a lot of two move blitzing units. He just doesn't really have enough of those. So this is just kind of a somewhat similar to the porcupine that is getting run out of London. It's just sort of a really basic way of saying, hey, go away, don't come at me, kind of thing. Um, and the reason for that is that the Soviets are playing a little bit for time. Like they're trying to get themselves built up a bit so that they can not get vaporized by the Germans. At the meantime, they needed to be at war with somebody, and so that somebody they picked was the Italians, because the Italians can't really do anything to them. It's kind of letting the Soviets be at war and collect their wartime income and get built up to fight the Germans and create some tension there later on, because at some point the Germans and the Soviets are going to have to go to war. That's just the nature of the game. The Germans want stuff that the Soviets have. The Soviets, want stuff the Germans have. So this is not a long-term situation. It's just a question for how long it lasts. Um, and it's just kind of giving the Soviets an opportunity to try to get a little extra cash in their pocket, kind of thing. Um, and you'll see that a lot with that. You'll see it a lot with the Arctic Convoy line. Kind of gets used as some negotiating ploys. You saw that with the Lend-Lease. The Allies really needed to get an extra fighter to Sydney, and they basically paid the Soviet Union to do that. The Allies sent a medium armor to the Soviets. The Soviets then sent a fighter to Sydney, and then the Allies sent another fighter to the Soviets. So the Soviets kind of laundered a medium armor in exchange for getting a fighter to Sydney. Um, but it was a time sensitive issue. It is really why they were willing to kind of pay that high cost, and allowed them to get a really critical unit to a very important fight at the time. Unfortunately for the Allies, it didn't really work out just because of that silly scramble fight, but it was absolutely worth their diplomatic effort to make that happen. You also would have seen a much different diplomatic situation if the CCP was alive. Um, the CCP being dead is a lot of why this board state looks the way it is. At that point, there's not a whole lot of reason for the Soviets to fight Japan. They've got bigger other problems. Um, they would normally be wanting to do that if they had a CCP to feed and boost and take care of and try to score a point with. But they don't. And so simultaneous within that, there's not a lot of reason for the Americans to cooperate, because they don't have a point with CCP to cooperate, and the Soviets aren't going to help the KMT because they're not going to get anything out of it either. Because there's not it's very kind of a back scratching relationship often between the CCP and the KMT, where they try to both get extra units out of it if they can, and deals get done between us. That's there's circumstances where one nation might kind of be your rival or your opponent in one theater, but an ally that you need in another theater, and you kind of almost have to divorce yourself a little bit, almost like compartmentalize your perspectives and negotiate almost by theater to get what you want for success. It's a little bit weird stylistically, I think, but it is very effective from a gameplay standpoint to kind of view things in that sort of way, that it's not one size fits all dynamics. But I think that's about it. Turn 11 is going to be just as much exciting as I think Turn 10 was, if not more so, as things break out here. I think we're going to see a lot of action on the field. So we'll touch back with y'all once that's all done. And in the meantime, everybody have a great day, and game on. Get some gaming in, everybody. Take care.